It's the TMZ Behind the Bar podcast with the TMZ lawyers, Jason Beckerman and Derek Kaufman.
Happy episode number 30, everybody.
Oh, it's our 30th, Jason.
Derek, I don't know if you know this, but the traditional 30th anniversary present is pearls. And so I got you something.
Did you get me pearl? I feel like Pretty Woman. Did you get me pearl earrings?
I didn't. I got you something better, actually. I got you my recipe card from Blue Apron for the pearl onion encrusted chicken that I had the other day.
Okay, where is it?
It's right here. I got you the card.
Oh, Blue Apron. It's the freshest, tastiest meals to order you can get. So I think people should go to blueapron.com/TMZ and get 3 free meals. What do you think?
I get free shipping as well, right?
Oh, nice.
Does everybody get free shipping?
I think everyone who goes to that site, blueapron.com/TMZ, first 3 meals free.
Awesome.
And this has no recipe.
No. All right. So back to the podcast, Derek. Beyonce has gotten herself in a lot of hot water recently for allegedly stealing parts of her really seminal song, Formation.
Yeah, this was a huge song at the Super Bowl, and she's now the subject of a lawsuit. She's been sued by the estate of a guy named Anthony Barre.
Yeah.
He's a New Orleans sensation. He was an MC, very closely associated with something called bounce music. In any event, he put out a video. He's passed away. He was killed tragically a couple years ago, but he put out a video called a 27-piece Huh, in which he says the words, it's not a rap song, but he says, "Oh yeah, baby, I like that." And if you listen closely to Formation, you might hear it.
Let's listen to Anthony first.
Oh yeah, baby. Oh yeah, oh yes, I like that.
So that's like a very distinct way of saying I like that. It went kind of viral and became a big sensation.
Right, it was kind of one of these videos that for a moment it was a big thing.
That's right.
Fast forward a number of years later, and Beyonce releases Formation, and what do we hear?
Oh yeah, baby. Oh yeah, oh yes, I like that.
So yeah, you hear that.
Well, they're obviously the same clip. She just lifted that clip from Anthony's video and put it in her song.
That's right. And you hear this in music all the time. We hear samples. This is how Biggie got big, and Puffy would put all those samples in. Right. But this is clearly lifted, and it's
not a sample either, because his was not a there's no
musical composition.
There's a lot of law that's been passed about what samples are, when you can take them, how you can use them, what royalties you have to pay to the person you sampled. This is not a sample. This was not a musical. This was not a song. She just took part of his YouTube video and put it in her song.
That's right. She just took something that was viral, and it's now become associated with the Formation song, which has made millions of dollars. And so the estate of Anthony is saying, you lifted our content. He has a copyright over that performance of whatever those words are. It's a type of performance. It's certainly protected by copyright. And they're saying, we want at least $20 million. You've made hundreds of millions on this song.
I think the estimate was she made $450 million.
I've heard estimates in the hundreds of millions, but it's hard to know.
I take those numbers with a grain of salt, and she obviously doesn't say 100% of all that. So I think she made far less than $450 million. But nevertheless, hundreds of millions of dollars on this song. And part of it, a small part, admittedly, but part of that was lifted directly from his video. She's going to have to pay up for that.
I think so. And what's important to me is when you listen to the part that she lifted, she's not giving any social commentary on that part.
Right.
She is just purely taking it because it's a catchy riff that makes her song better. She's using it for the sound of it.
And just as an aside, Derek brought up the social commentary because there are exceptions to copyright laws. You guys all sort of know them. Parody, for example. You can parody it. You could certainly parody a song. You can make fun of Formation if you wanted to.
Two Live Crew made a famous case where they parodied Pretty Woman.
Right, and there's also like newsworthiness exceptions. If you're a news organization, you can use some things. There's all these different exceptions, but a music video stealing from a video that was made on a street by a guy years before does not fall into any of those exceptions. She simply just can't steal somebody else's work and use it on her own.
Yeah, I think it's important that you put it that way. It is stealing at some point. Now, I don't know if these allegations are true. I don't know what Beyonce will say. She might say, I tried to license it from some other entity and his family doesn't know. I think that's unlikely here because it's such a small video. But infringement sounds legally technical and doesn't sound that bad. It is stealing. I think people should really understand what that is. You're stealing someone's piece of art.
So to Derek's point that he made earlier, this is, borrowing other people's copyrighted work for the purposes of music is as old as music itself, really, and there's all these arguments, legal arguments, some of them good, that every bit of music is building on the shoulders of what came before you. And there is truth to that. And most famously, this came up recently in the dispute between Marvin Gaye's estate and Robin Thicke. Robin Thicke came out with the song "Blurred Lines." As soon as a lot of people who are in the music world listened to it, they said, "Hey, that's got to give it up" by Marvin Gaye, the song that came out 30 years prior to Blurred Lines.
Yeah, the only way to understand these cases is to hear whether they're similar. So
let's listen to Robin Thicke's Blurred Lines and listen for the notes that are really coming through. It's not so much about the lyrics. All right, and now compare that to what Marvin Gaye did, again, 30 or so years before.
yeah, his song is 1977. It was 40 years ago. We don't have what we had in the Beyonce case. I think we can. We should start with that, right, Jason?
Yeah, it's not. They're not just taking Marvin Gaye's music and sticking it into the Blurred Line song. What they've done is they have paid what Robin Thicke said he did was paid homage to Marvin Gaye's music by doing something that sounded almost exactly the same.
Yeah, undeniably the vibe, and I think in interviews about the song, Robin Thicke said he was influenced by Marvin Gaye. He doesn't walk away from this.
He mimicked the groove.
Yeah, and there's something about the funky vibe in it, but is that the same thing as what Beyonce did? I don't think so.
It's a little different. So Marvin Gaye's family, his estate, sued Robin Thicke and Pharrell and the other producers behind the song. Case went all the way to trial. The jury awarded Marvin Gaye's estate, his family, $7.4 million. The judge later reduced that to $5.3 million, but it's an incredible verdict against Robin Thicke. Yeah. And it's one of these, if you read the literature on this, it sends shockwaves through the music industry because it's always a question about how far an artist can go to borrow or to stand on the shoulders of he who came before. And in this case, a lot of musicologists and others in the industry really thought that Robin Thicke hadn't gone too far, but the judge and the jury felt otherwise, and they awarded this enormous award to Marvin Gaye's estate.
Yeah, it's important to note that this case is currently on appeal to the Ninth Circuit, and many artists have filed what are called amicus briefs, where they're friends and they're saying this is going to rock the music industry if you let this verdict stand. So it could be overturned, but right now we've got a jury verdict, and there's a lot of deference given to those.
Yeah, and I just wanted to read through a couple of the elements that courts, judges, and juries look to when assessing whether or not one song impermissibly copies from another song. You're looking for the beats per minute. Blurred Line had 120 beats per minute. Got to Give It Up is 122, so very, very similar. Its melody, which is defined as the combination of pitch and rhythm. It's something that's beyond my knowledge to speak on. But
and they get experts for this. Musicologists can get up on the stand and tell you if the songs are actually similar enough that they seem copied.
A couple of elements. Lyrics can be, in this case, lyrics weren't a factor, but lyrics can be, obviously, if you're copying someone's lyric, the key that it's in, and other factors. And one of the things that the court papers focused on between these two songs was there was syncopated cowbells. And an electric piano.
Oh, yeah. It's like the old SNL skit. You hear the ding, ding, ding.
More cowbell. And so those elements, the fact that they were so similar, led the judge and the jury to say, you know what? They crossed the line. We're going to give musical artists some leeway to copy what came before, but at this point, you've gotten to the element of stealing, gotten to the level of stealing.
Yeah, and these are judgment calls, though, right? The musicologist.
That's a great point.
Yeah, you don't have someone that it has to be identical. What you have is, did they steal it? What they're trying to get at is, did Robin Thicke actually steal from Marvin Gaye, and he couldn't have done it without him?
I'm so happy you brought that up. The difficulty of the judges and juries. You know, we had talked about the Led Zeppelin case, right? And in the Led Zeppelin case, this is also, I believe, in 2014, about the same time as Marvin Gaye brought his claims. Led Zeppelin was sued by a band member, a guy who created a song called, what was it called?
This is a band called Spirit, and the song is called Taurus.
Right. Let's listen. First of all, I think it's important. Let's hear the opening, very famous guitar riff from Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin. All right, years before that, the band Spirit...
Don't you just want to hear the whole thing?
Yeah, I do. I really do. The years before that, the band Spirit comes out with the song Taurus, and it features this riff.
That song from 1968, Stairway to Heaven, released in 1971.
And there was also evidence submitted at trial that the folks from Led Zeppelin had actually been to a Spirit concert. They had, in fact, heard this song. The Zeppelin guys, Jimmy Page, got up on the stand. He said, that's nonsense. We may have gone, but I have no recollection of that. He's the one that did the guitar riff. And you know,
the jury got to see Jimmy Page come in. Remember, this is a 2014 case, so it only came past the statute of limitations because of some re-release of Stairway to Heaven. Just so everyone knows, you can't just sue Led Zeppelin
30 years later. Yeah, but the interesting part there is that in that case, the judge and the jury rejected the claims against Led Zeppelin, said there wasn't necessarily the similarities between the two guitar riffs to establish that that Zeppelin had stolen from this guy. Which I think, if you compare that, it's even more similar than the Marvin Gaye than Blurred Lines is to Marvin Gaye's song.
It's nearly impossible to my ear, and granted, we have untrained ears, so maybe there were some musicologists. But putting that aside, to the untrained ear, it's impossible to reconcile these results. I agree. One sounds like the vibe. I get the Blurred Lines sounds a bit like Marvin Gaye's "Got to Give It Up," but it's more of a vibe feel. The Taurus riff is slow enough that I hear notes that I also hear in "Stairway to Heaven." It just seems too close. It seems too close to be coincidental.
And all you can say is, look, this was two different jurisdictions, two different judges, two different juries that came to different results. But I to your point, I think they're irreconcilable. I think if you're going to say that Robin Thicke copied from Marvin Gaye, you also have to say that Led Zeppelin borrowed from Spirit and vice versa.
Yeah, and I think what's difficult about these cases is I don't know if I was trying to reconcile these in my mind, and you have juries, right? And so you have Robin Thicke come in, and Robin Thicke has maybe a callow sort of rich kid. He's the son of Alan Thicke. Maybe he's not as likable, so the jury's not as sympathetic. And then you've got a rock legend. You've got when you get Jimmy Page, who used to play the double neck guitar, coming in, I don't see a jury ruling against Jimmy Page. I could actually see them ruling against a guy like Robin Thicke, because I don't think all celebrities are created equal.
I think you're aging yourself. I really do. I mean, Robin Thicke in today's world is so much more famous than Jimmy Page. It's
Without
not
question.
even close.
Without question, but is he likable famous?
That's what I'm saying.
The
likability aspect I'll give you. I don't know. He's certainly unlikable now, given what we found out about his family life. But at the time, he was sort of the it guy for a while. Super good looking, much better looking than Jimmy Page ever dreamed of being, and kind of, charming, I think. So I don't know how that cuts exactly.
He's no Alan Thicke. And he had done some interviews about how, struggling with drug addiction and things like that. So I'm grasping at straws. I'm trying to think what was in the jury's mind.
We just don't know how it could have come. But, I think what is really important to tie this entire discussion up is there was a lawsuit a number of years back about the two of the most famous songs in music history.
Absolutely. Yes, you can't do a podcast about music without mentioning the Beatles.
So let's do a word from Blue Apron and then come back and talk about the Beatles.
Absolutely.
All right. So, Derek, the best thing that happened in my entire world about a week and a half ago was
someone had his first Blue Apron meal.
We got our first Blue Apron. We presented it to our kids. You mentioned it as being like Christmas morning. My kids are 9 and 7, and they've been hearing about this for weeks as we got Blue Apron on board. And when it came, they were breathless. They called me from home before I got home, and I had to tell them, you can't open it yet. They open it up, and I took some video of this. It's really cute. My kids are opening up, and they're literally pulling out the ingredients from the box.
Yeah, you had the family style portion, so you had a lot more to open. I've got a small family. Jason's got 2 kids, so they must have been throwing all sorts of broccoli around.
The kale was fantastic. But, and my younger one, I will tell you, who is not very difficult. She is a mac and cheese and pasta kind of girl, and, you hear about these kids. She's one of them. But we had this delicious cod the first night, and it was fantastic. It really was. I mean, it was so easy to put together. It was quick. It was, this was free for us. But even if we had paid for it, it would be because we took advantage of the promotion, of course. But even if we had to pay for it, it would have been less than $10 per person.
And this is box to plate in under 40 minutes.
It really was. It was delicious. It was fresh. It was easy. The cleanup was a snap. I mean, it really was a great meal experience, and my kids had a blast with it.
Nice. So if you want to get in on this and get your first 3 meals free with free shipping, head on over to blueapron.com/TMZ and order up.
Derek, ever since we first got on this idea of doing a podcast about the similarities in music and music lawsuits, you mentioned nothing except George Harrison.
That's all I think about when
now
this
we pushed it off to after the break. You must be champing at the bit.
I am champing at the bit. So I think arguably the biggest one of these cases that put this idea of copyright infringement and copying someone else's song on the map was the controversy back in the 70s between My Sweet Lord by George Harrison. George had left the Beatles. He releases a song called My Sweet Lord, and he got into a bit of hot water. Let's hear My Sweet Lord first.
My sweet Lord, my Lord.
All right.
Boy, I'm a music fan of the 50s, and that sounds really, really familiar.
Does it already ring a bell? Because there's
a bell.
sometimes when you take a song that is a bit more obscure, like what Beyonce did was take something that was relatively obscure to the nation, so not everyone knew, maybe if you were in New Orleans. But let's hear, if it sounds familiar, maybe it sounds like this.
He's so fine. She were mine.
So that, of
so
course,
My Sweet Lord and
the chiffons.
He's so fine that the way that comes through is almost identical.
Yeah, and look, they're clearly different songs. George Harrison was a bit more acoustic, and He's So Fine is sort of wall of sound type Phil Spector stuff. But Jason, I mean, do you hear "He's So Fine" in "My Sweet Lord"?
I do. It's funny. It sounds to me like the comparison between Blurred Lines and Gotta Give It Up, and it sounds, but both of which I think are less like copying
That's right.
than what we heard from the Zeppelin Spirit songs.
Yeah. So this was new stuff. And the Chiffons were sort of past their prime at this point. They file a lawsuit in 1971, and this becomes a huge trial because you got a Beatle involved. And a musicologist named Dominic Pedler came up, and he compared the two songs in this way that we're talking about, looking at harmony and syncopation.
Keys and syncopation.
Right, and there's very interesting similarities. So there's a 3-syllable title refrain, "He's So Fine, My Sweet Lord." That is a similarity right off the bat, followed by a 5-3-2 descent of the major. You sort of hear the key go down. That's called descent of the major. They both have a 5-3-2. There's similar tempos, 121 and 145 beats, as we talked about before. And there's a similar ascent when there's a middle part of the song where they say, "I really want to see you."
Yeah.
That's in George Harrison's song,
Yeah.
and they say, "I don't know how I'm gonna do it." They
So
both
an ascent.
they
at that
ascent and descent in similar ways. So the court ruled.
So this goes to a jury or before a jury?
It goes to a jury, and there's a damages assessment of $1.6 million, which turned out to be 75% of the royalties. George actually offered before they went to trial. You'll often have settlement offers so you can avoid the risk of what the jury will say. He offered 40% of the royalties, and the Chiffons said, "We got this in the bag," and they did. They won 75% of the royalties. The holding is interesting because George Harrison was found to have subconsciously copied the Chiffons,
Right.
which means that he was just grooving out, listening to some Chiffons, and then it influenced the way he made music. And I think that's an interesting point.
It is, and it's one of the things that's consistent through the case law. There's a lot of inconsistency, but one of the consistencies, the two elements you really need to show are, number one, you need awareness or accessibility, access to the song that came before.
Which was easily satisfied for George.
It was easily satisfied. He knew of this song. And two, you need similarity between the music. You do not need intent. And in most civil crimes that you see, you either need intent or some sort of a negligence. Here, they don't really look to that, right? They just simply say, look, one, did you ever hear the song before? And number two, are there similarities between them? We don't want to hear about the fact that it wasn't in your head at the time you wrote the song. It clearly did influence your ultimate product, that whether you meant to do that or not is irrelevant.
But it softens the blow because it doesn't.
Yeah.
If George Harrison were known as a pure intentional plagiarist, I think it would hit his legacy harder than if he just subconsciously was influenced.
It would hit his legacy, number one, and number two, that's in today's day and age. I don't think this really was so much the case in 1971. That's when you really get stacked on with punitive damages as well. For all of you who know that term, punitive damages. Punitive damages are always meant to address intentional acts. You can't just be if you're just purely found negligent, you'll never get punitives. It's when you act intentionally or recklessly.
They want to punish you.
That you want to be punished. Punitive damages. The word punitive means punishment, and that's the purpose of punitive damages. And in today's world, whether or not you intend to infringe, like frankly, Beyonce clearly intended to infringe.
Yeah, it's a tougher case.
It seems. That's where punitive damages really become an element.
I think that's right. Quick note about the aftermath, because I always wondered, what do the artists do afterwards? And George Harrison, because he lived for a number of years afterwards, said he was extremely paranoid about making music afterwards. And I wonder how that impacts a guy like Robin Thicke, who's still in the prime of his career. We really haven't heard another big song from Robin Thicke. Maybe it's in his head that he's so influenced by Marvin Gaye that he doesn't want to make music. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Oh, roll the dice, Robin.
And John Lennon actually threw him under the bus in an interview with Playboy shortly before he died, said George must have known he was copying the Chiffons when he did that.
Oh,
so
wow.
there's a lot of rancor amongst the Beatles after they broke up, and I thought that was interesting that shortly before he died, he said, George, you knew.
Just a little bit of behind the scenes here at TMZ. Derek and I are now being pulled out of this podcast because stuff is blowing up on the newsroom floor. We are going to have to come back for mail time in a little bit, or tomorrow because it's getting late.
Yeah.
Derek, what's that sound?
Sounds like mail time. Parker, you got some good ones?
Yes, I do. Remember to write in your questions and comments to behindthebar@tmz.com. First one up is from Mark. I saw that video you guys posted of the Cash Me Outside girl attacking a passenger on a flight the other day.
Cash me outside.
She seems to be causing a bit of trouble. At what point does the parent become liable for what a minor does under their watch?
Oh, that's a good question.
Who is this who wrote this in?
Mark.
Mark. We like Mark.
Nice.
Really good question.
You want to take a stab at this?
Well, I mean, depends what you mean by liable, Mark. So we have two types of liability: criminal liability and civil liability. Do you have to pay for the damages, or do you have to actually do time, or get a misdemeanor conviction?
I think on the criminal side, they're safe.
Yeah, I think they're safe. I do think that at some point, if your kid is acting in a criminal way, you can be charged with contributing to delinquency of a minor, potentially aiding and abetting, but you're not going to be convicted for the crime they commit. So in this Cash Me Outside video, you see the girl, she gets into this awful fight with this woman on the plane. She seems to be trying to throw haymakers.
And this makes sense. In the criminal context where the stakes are highest, where they can deprive you of your liberty, throw you in prison.
You better have done something yourself.
Yeah, you're responsible for that. And that's why we sometimes hear about cases charging minors as adults when they commit adult-type crimes. You're always responsible, ultimately, for the criminal stuff. The civil stuff is
Civil
different.
stuff, I think very much so. I know there are some statutes in California and others. I think all 50 states probably have these parental liability statutes, which they limit the amount of time. And the idea would be that if the kid commits a willful act, not just a negligent act, but a willful act, and causes damage, that the parent will have to pay for it. But there's a certain age limit, right? On the early side, like a 6-year-old is incapable under the law of creating intent, so you don't have liability there. But anybody from like age 8 to the age of majority, usually 18.
Yeah, not only that, there's these other torts that you could go after the parent for negligent supervision of the child, or if the parent is inducing them and egging them on, you might be able to have a tort for that because children don't necessarily have the full volition of an adult, right?
Yeah.
They listen to their parents, and if your parent says, go kick that dog, you might be liable for the animal cruelty in some way for inducing that act.
All right, next one up is from Brittany. You guys posted an In-N-Out story recently talking about a dry cleaners in Wichita. With
My
this,
favorite story
Derek's
of
favorite
the past
story.
month. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
a dry cleaners in Wichita with the same name as the burgers chain. You even had pictures of their logos, which looked a little similar. You ended the article saying that it would be a slam dunk case for In-N-Out. Why would it be so simple since these are completely two different businesses?
Now, look, TMZ sometimes takes a perspective on this, and I was writing this story with Charles Latibaudier, the dreadlocks and everything.
We're just allowed to call them locks.
Just locks.
White people, I learned
That's
this.
true.
I'm not allowed to refer to them as dreads.
Got it.
Yes.
Got it. So Charles with the hair.
Yeah.
We'll just call him Charles with the hair. So he's writing the story. He said, this seems like a slam dunk. The logos are very, very similar. What you have is the In-N-Out logo, which has a yellow arrow and red lettering. This has red lettering and a yellow hanger. Because it's a dry cleaning store. I thought it was very clever. Now, it does seem like there might be some confusion, but I wanted to push back on that a little bit because I think the yellow hanger is clearly in the dry cleaning business, and all the logos and the trademarks for In-N-Out are to be used in burger joints. And you have to say, what will be the consumer confusion? Does anyone think that In-N-Out, the burger chain, is getting into the dry cleaning business? I don't think so. I think the Vietnamese dry cleaning owner in Wichita, Kansas, where there are no In-N-Out burger chains, because they only mostly service the West Coast, I don't know if there's going to be consumer confusion or if you're going to dilute their marketplace.
First of all, please, for the love of God, tell me the owner of the dry cleaner is Vietnamese and you just not just use a racial
did not
stereotype.
just make that up. I believe his name was Fap. Yeah.
All right.
Fap
Thank you.
Von
All right.
Traum or
First. Second, let me ask you a question honestly.
Yes.
Do you think that the dry cleaner owner was trying to trade on the trademark of In-N-Out? In other words, I get it.
It's a fair question.
There's nothing in Wichita. There's no In-N-Outs in Wichita. Nobody thinks that the In-N-Out's trying to get in. But are they, in fact, saying, I kind of think it's cool, and therefore I'm going to use their same logo in order to promote my dry cleaner?
It's a fair question. I can't get into the dry cleaner's head, but I do believe In-N-Out, before filing the lawsuit, reached out to him and made him aware that he was trading off their trademark. And the
trademarks are pretty similar. The name is the same.
Very
so
similar.
I think a reasonable juror would conclude that he was trying to trade off. But to your point, I mean, you do have to have consumer confusion. Any trademark lawsuit, you've got to put somebody up on the witness stand and say, boy, I was confused in one of two things. Either I thought that this hamburger that I was buying was from the In-N-Out burger and it wasn't. That's one way. Or I thought that In-N-Out was getting into the dry cleaner business, and because I trust the In-N-Out brand, I thought, hey, I actually trust this brand as well. And you need witness testimony to support that, but I think it's theoretically possible. Not a slam dunk. Maybe not. Maybe we'd have to talk to Charles about why he thought it was a slam dunk. But.
Yeah, Charles wanted to make a joke about it being settled quicker than you can get through the drive-through. I don't think it's going to be that easy, and I think if the dry cleaner has his druthers and can hire some competent counsel, there could be a real lawsuit on their hands.
But here's the thing. If they really are trading off of it, isn't he wrongfully profiting from In-N-Out's trademark? I wonder if that gets you anywhere.
I think that gets you somewhere maybe in the copyright sense. I don't know if that gets you there in the trademark, because a trademark is specifically to be used in trade, and when they file these trademarks, they use them in a particular industry. On the copyright, the artistic expression of the piece of art, that the In-N-Out lettering and that festive arrow.
Yeah.
There, I think you're right. For lack of a better word.
Festive arrow.
The festive swoosh that they have. There, I think you're taking my artwork in some sense, and they really are. The red lettering and the spacing does look a lot like In-N-Out, the burger chain, but there, I think it sounds in copyright rather than a trademark.
So we have flaming arrows, we have deadly arrows,
Yes.
we have arrows meant for love, and we have festive arrows.
We have
now.
festive arrows as well. And I've always said I want to open up like or start a business like Sizzler,
Yeah.
but for suntan lotion or something. Sizzler suntan lotion. What could they really do?
What a bad connotation that you're going to sizzle under the sun.
I wanted a new example
Yeah.
because I think Parker is sick of McDonald's and Nike. So I tried.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in this week.
We have a
Oh.
third one.
Oh,
Oh,
Parker.
curveball.
That's a fun one. Robert writes in asking an interesting question. Lawyers seem like they have a lot of mundane work to do before anything gets interesting. During this time, I would imagine it's easy to miss a key detail in all of that reading. What is the largest small mistake you have ever made?
Oh, wow. You mean the most consequential small mistake, probably.
Yes.
Yeah, I think
Wow.
having to reinterpret Robert's question might have been yours. I mean,
Yeah.
that was unnecessary. We all got one. We all got one. You know, honestly, I've made a million small mistakes that have had consequence, but nothing's coming to mind. Parker, you got to run these things by us beforehand.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think Parker's fired. I think the biggest
Oh,
mistake was
hiring Parker.
Yeah, bringing Parker back for mail time this week was the biggest mistake
Right.
I've ever made. I wanted to keep Maddie.
Right. We all wanted to keep Maddie. I tell you what, Robert, we will come up with something. That's going to be our homework for the next week.
Yeah.
And in next week's podcast, we will answer Robert's question with some specificity, and I want a true like mea culpa moment from both of us.
Yeah, I don't think I've made that big of an error, but I want to find a big error like where a comma was really important.
Oh God.
All right, that is it for mail time.
All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in this week. As we let you know earlier, we're partnering with Blue Apron. We're very proud to be doing so. So as always, check out this week's menu and get your first 3 meals free.
Yeah, but go to blueapron.com/TMZ. The meals are on them and the shipping too.
Awesome. See you guys. Thanks for watching. If you want more nerdy deep dives into the legal side of celebrity news, hit our subscribe button right here.
And check out our previous episodes over here.